Okay, let's go ahead and start with a word of prayer. Our gracious Heavenly Father, I just want to thank you so much for each of these that have come today. Lord, that they are interested in what you have to say about their health and how that they should live. And I just thank you that you have guidelines and that you have ways that you would have us to do things. And I just thank you that we have people that can teach us different things that on how we should be eating, how we should be living, that we can honor and please you. And I just thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen. So, today, as I was thinking about what to do, I kept saying, okay, God, you told me to do this. You're going to have to show me what topic you want me to do today. Because I was running out of time after doing the Bible study. I was just like, ready to go. And this is the topic that the Lord gave me. And how many of you have digestive issues? It's a very common thing, right? Digestive issues are a very common thing. And I've had digestive issues on and off for ever since high school. You know, that's the first time I really realized it was at the end of high school and stuff. And did you know that like 80 to 90% of your immune system starts in your gut? 80 to 90%. And your immune system is what keeps you from getting sick. And that's one of the reasons we have so many sick people is because our digestion is not where it should be. So this area that we're going to talk about today is very key on that. But I remember several years ago, I was doing some studying and all of a sudden started hearing this term, anti-nutrients. I thought, what? Anti-nutrients. There's anti-nutrients in our food. What are anti-nutrients? And I thought, that is just really odd. So, today, we are going to learn some things that I've learned recently in the last few years because it's gone out of mode in our modern society. Okay? We don't know how to prepare foods the way that they used to prepare them that made them nutritious for us. And because of that, there's a lot of anti-nutrients sneaking in. And we're eating these things and they're making us sick. And God put them on there for a reason, but He intended us to fix them differently so that we would neutralize those things before we ate them. And we're going to talk about some of that today. So today, we are going to be talking about grains, seeds, nuts, and legumes, and how you're supposed to properly prepare them for digestion so that you neutralize the anti-nutrients. Okay? So those anti-nutrients don't go in and ruin our guts. Okay? So, first of all, God's design for all of these four things was for them to be stable during the time of germination. So God had to put something on grains, seeds, nuts, and legumes so that they could make it to germination and become another plant. Okay? If they didn't, things would happen and they would never survive. Okay? So God had to do things. So He put them there. Okay? They're there. And it's not for our health, but it's for the seeds and nuts and all of those. It's for their health so that they can germinate. Okay? He put protective measures in place. And these protective measures get in the way of our nutrition. Okay? Some of these are phytic acid. All whole grains contain phytic acid in the outer layer or bran. This phytic acid combines with calcium, magnesium, copper, iron, and zinc in the intestinal tract, and it blocks mineral absorption. I remember ever since high school, different times through the years after we were married, people would say, you need to get a hair analysis. And every time I got a hair analysis, it basically, I had no minerals. There was nothing there. And I didn't know what to do about it. I didn't know any of this information at that time. No nutrients. A diet that is high in untreated cooked whole grains may lead to mineral deficiencies and bone loss. That's another big issue we have, don't we? With the older people getting the bone loss. Another one is there are enzyme inhibitors on the outside. Raw, untreated, and uncooked whole grains, like all seeds, contain enzyme inhibitors. Digestion is impaired when the enzyme inhibitors prevent digestive enzymes from doing their work. We need those digestive enzymes that start in the mouth. There are some of them in the mouth. One of them, I think, is amylase that's in the mouth. And anyway, they help start breaking down the food. There's more in our stomach, and then there's all the way through the digestive tract. There's these enzymes that break down the stuff so that they're small enough to go through and be absorbed into our bloodstream. But they have to be small enough to get through. Otherwise, it just goes straight through our system and doesn't do us any good. Okay? So, God put them there. But these, if we don't do something, there are enzyme inhibitors that keeps them from doing their job. They can't do anything. It neutralizes them. And then there are also, in grains, difficult to digest proteins. The proteins in grains, such as gluten, that's one we've been hearing a lot about, right? They're harder to digest. And the process of soaking and fermenting grains, it partially breaks down that protein so that they're easier to digest. So those are some of the things that we're talking about. We want to get rid of those anti-nutrients. We want to neutralize those things. So how do you do that? God has a perfect design for all of this. And it's just been interesting as I've been reading and studying and stuff for this, all the different things that God has done to help us. So those are the three problems. There are four methods of neutralizing these things that we can do to help them be more digestible. Okay, so the first one is we can we can soak whole grains before cooking them.
You know, Jerry Lee's mom used to do that, from Taiwan. And she never told me why.
Right.
But she always soaked the rice. It's like, you're making the rice wet before you cook it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yes.
I continue to cook, just throw the rice in the cooker.
Yeah.
But she was
so much healthier if you can soak it beforehand. But you don't just soak it. You need to add an acid to it to help break down that thing.
Like
so
vinegar?
Like apple cider vinegar, you could use lemon juice, you could use kefir, you could use, there's numerous ones, and we're going to talk about some of those that you could use to break that down. And then you rinse it away before cooking it. And with grains, when you have soaked them, when you get ready to cook them, it only takes about half the amount of time if you've soaked them beforehand. One thing you were talking about, rice. There is another thing in rice that's not mentioned in these things here, but I want to let you know. Rice contains arsenic. Okay? Arsenic is another one of those things that is not good for us. Okay? There is a simple way of getting rid of almost all of that arsenic, and that is by when you're soaking them, put in some charcoal, a little bit of charcoal. The charcoal will absorb the arsenic. And then when you rinse it away, it rinses it all away. It takes all that black away, so you don't have to worry about having black rice. It rinses it all away, and it takes the arsenic with it. So that's all you have to do is just add a little bit of that, and it'll just take that away. So that's another thing. So I'm going to continue on here. So So this is how you cook whole rice, whole millet, or even rolled grains like rolled oats. Soaking the grains in warm, acidic water for as little as 7 hours will neutralize some or most of all of the phytic acid. What happens is that the acidulated warm soaking mimics germination and unlocking those enzymes, and especially the enzyme phytase, which neutralizes the troublesome phytic acid for soaking, okay? Then when it comes to what about flours, okay? You can create nutritious flours, like your whole grain flours, by soaking it before it's baked into something. Add a soaking stage into your recipe with the liquids before you add the rest of the dry ingredients and make it into whatever you're going to make it. But at least 7 hours is when you want to have that in. You can use it in things like muffins, pancakes, pasta, biscuits, all of those things by soaking it a little bit ahead of time and then going ahead with your recipe.
You know, some people like still cut oats over regular oats. Does that have something to do with anything else other than the texture? Because they're two different textures.
No, it's basically the texture. They're still the same. They're still oats. You still need to prepare them the same way. You both of them need to be soaked, whether it's oatmeal or whether it's steel cut. Now, one thing that you can get at Costco is they have sprouted oatmeal. Sprouted oatmeal has already been through the soaking stage, so you can just use it right away. Okay? So we're going to talk about sprouting in just a little bit here. So you just soak the flour and the other ingredients for a minimum of 7 hours, and then you rinse it all off. Sometimes you don't have to rinse it depending on what acidic base you use. Apple cider vinegar can make an off taste on some things, and you might want to rinse that off. But sometimes you can use something else, like even sourdough starter can be used as an acid. Just a little bit in there, it can be used, and then it doesn't have that off flavor. If you're making like a cookie or you're making something like that you don't want that sour taste in there, you can use something that's not quite so soury tasting as your acid. It'll still neutralize those things, but yet you don't have to rinse it all off and start over. You can just go. Yeah.
When you say a little bit of acid, do you have like a proportion amount, like a tablespoon?
Yeah, it's usually like a tablespoon per cup of liquid. Okay. So it's not a lot, but it's some. Okay. The next one you can do, so we've talked about soaking whole grains, then soaking flours. Now the third one is you can sprout. Now sprouting allows the seed to complete its germination, and the end result is that it neutralizes the phytic acid and the enzyme inhibitors and breaks down the hard to digest components. The gluten, when you sprout them or when you make do the souring, like the fermenting of it, both of those things break down the gluten. And there are a lot of people that have issues that can't eat flour or most things normally. They think, oh, I must be allergic to gluten. Some are not allergic to gluten, but when it is neutralized and broken down into better, easier to eat ways, then they can, then they can eat it once it's prepared properly. Okay, now if it's someone who's celiac, that is a true allergic reaction, and probably they couldn't, at least for now until they heal their gut. Sometimes if they heal their gut, then they're able to have that. But I wouldn't just say, oh, you're celiac, oh, no problem, we'll just, no, I wouldn't do that. Let's see. Okay, and the fourth way is then souring or fermenting it. And that's through making sourdough, like sourdough bread or something like that. But unlike today's stuff out there in the market that uses the commercial and the selected strains of yeast, you need to be using the wild yeast that God has provided in nature. And they neutralize the phytic acid, all of these things, and they break them down. And even those, even the glutens, they help to break down. So I'm going to go through a little bit of a history here of on whole grains. Whole grain bread was a staple of the biblical diet. Yes.
I'm sorry, did I miss number 3?
Okay. Number 1 was soaking whole grains. Number 2 was soaking flours. Okay. Number 3 was sprouting, and number 4 was the souring. And that is in the order of effectiveness. Well, number 1 and 2 are basically the same. Okay. Whether you're soaking, that's 1, and then sprouting, and then souring. Those are in the order of effectiveness. So if all of these ways, sourdough, sour, that kind of thing is the most effective way of breaking down as much as possible and making it the best to digest. But you need to at least be doing the soaking or the sprouting. But the sourdough is really, really, really good. So let's go into a little bit of history. So the whole grain bread was a staple of the biblical diet, yet it was prepared differently and more nutritiously than the bread most people make today. This bread was naturally leavened with wild yeast or sourdough, and it was one of a slow preparation. And like soaking or sprouting, it makes the grains highly digestible. This rather long but very good quote I'm going to read to you is from the source is called something called "Be Kind to Your Grains," and that's what I'm going to read here. It's put out by the Weston A. Price Foundation. Has anyone heard of that? Weston A. Price is a very, very, very good source. They've been around for probably 50 years. They've been around a long time. And he was a doctor, and he put out a lot of information. He's passed on, I don't know how many years ago. It's been several years ago that he passed on. So, but he was a doctor, and he was helping people get through and coming up with all these things. And he published a lot of good stuff. You can look them up online, Weston A. Price Foundation. So anyway, this is a quote that he has. Most of these anti-nutrients, like phytic acid and enzyme inhibitors primarily, are part of the seeds. He's calling seeds, grains, nuts, legumes, all in one category there, okay? It's the seed system of preservation. They prevent sprouting until the conditions are right, okay? That's what they want to do. You don't want it to be ruined when it already goes into the soil. You want it to be ready to go so that it can sprout and grow. Plants need moisture, warmth, time, and slight acidity in order to sprout. Proper preparation of grains is a kind and gentle process that imitates the process that occurs in nature. It involves soaking for a period in warm, acidulated water in the preparation of porridge or long, slow sourdough formation in the making of bread. Such processes neutralize phytic acid and enzyme inhibitors. Vitamin content increases, particularly the B vitamins. I was reading one time, and like the B vitamins just like go off the chart in how much they increase the amount there is between the grain and once they're sprouted. It's just like huge. And B vitamins are one of the things that so many people are lacking in. I know when I got into college, my second year in college, I was so sick. And I came home, and the doctor couldn't find anything wrong with me, so I went to a naturopath, and he tested me, he says, you are B vitamin deficient. I was really low on my B vitamins, and he started giving me stuff to bring me back up. But your B's give you your energy. You know, you need that energy. There are so many things that the B vitamins, there's a long list of B vitamins, you know, at least 12 that we know of, you know. You know, I can think of B12 as one that's for the brain and for energy and different things like that. But yes, your B vitamins, and this just brings sprouting them or whatever, just brings them off the chart. There are also other anti-nutrients like tannins, complex sugars, gluten, and other difficult to digest substances that are partly broken down into simpler components that are more readily available for absorption. So they break it down so that it can get into our system. Animals that nourish themselves primarily on grain and other plant matter have as many as 4 stomachs. Okay? Their intestines are longer, as is the entire digestive transit time. Man, on the other hand, has but 1 stomach and a much shorter intestine compared to the herbivorous animals. These features of his anatomy allow him to pass animal products before they're putrefied. He's talking about man, not the animals here, right here. So we are able to, having the shorter intestines and stuff like that, we're able to get other things through our anatomy faster so that they don't putrefy, like the proteins, like meats, okay? If it's an herbivorous animal, they're not eating meat, okay? And they have that, they don't have to worry about fermenting in there, okay? But we have to get it out or it will ferment in there, okay? And so that fermenting will, in the gut, will make us less able to adapt to a diet that's high in grains, unless, of course, we prepare them properly. So that's what we're talking today. When grains are properly prepared through soaking, sprouting, and sour leavening, the friendly bacteria in the microscopic world do some of our digesting for us in the container or whatever. Just as these same lactobacilli do their work in the first and the second stomachs of the herbivores. So, the well-meaning advice of many nutritionists to consume whole grains as our ancestors did and not refined flours and polished rice can be misleading and harmful in its consequences. For while our ancestors ate whole grains, they did not consume them as presented in our modern cookbooks in the form of quick rice breads, granolas, bran preparations, and other hastily prepared casseroles and concoctions. Our ancestors and virtually all pre-industrial people soaked and fermented their grains before making them into porridge, breads, cakes, and casseroles. And it's been kind of like forgotten. And when did it start? Here it says the industrialization age, which is not that long ago, but it was before my time, you know, and probably before all of our time. It was already happening, and it didn't get passed down to our generation, and we don't know how to do that. And this is so important. So it doesn't seem a stretch to me to assume that in biblical times, most grains were prepared slowly. Bread was a substantial part of the diet, and the people made it through a slow process of natural yeast leavening. Soaking porridges for long periods seems to be the universal practice around the world in industrial society.
Do they still do that in Israel? Because remember, that's all they had all the time was bread, and even our guide, the Roses, he's like, you want to go get some bread?
Yep.
No, I think I'm like bloated of bread. I don't need anymore.
There is, however, a notable exception in the Bible during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, or the Passover. The Israelites ate unleavened bread. From Leviticus 23:6 says, the Feast of Unleavened Bread to the Lord, 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. Now, you think, well, why would God do that if it has these anti-nutrients in it and all this stuff? Well, He made our bodies to be very resistant and very residual to come back and deal with it. When our bodies are not constantly bombarded with these things, okay, they can handle some of it and get rid of it, okay? It's the constant bombardment that we have in our days, because we haven't done any of this, that we have issues. To do it for 7 days out of a year was not an issue. It was not big. The body could handle that. It's the constant stuff that we get that the body can't handle, okay? So I'm not going to go into any more of that, but there's some of that. So that's on grains. I want to go into also, oh, that was the other one. Come here. I get these things apart. So another little thing on why soak whole grains. In their raw and uncracked state, all whole grains contain the phytic acid in the outer layer or bran. This phytic acid combines with, well, we basically did that. I'm not going to go into any more, but then I want to go into the difference between nuts and seeds. There is a little bit of difference. Oh, I know there was one I missed here that I wanted to read, and that was on corn. Corn, it has something here. Okay, corn is specific. You have to do something even different with corn. Unlike other grains, whether gluten-containing or gluten-free, corn requires a special treatment to make it fully nutritious. And this is another quote from the Weston A. Price Foundation. It needs to be first soaked in lime water, water in which calcium carbonate or calcium oxide is dissolved, a process called nixtamalization, something like that, that softens the corn for use and releases vitamin B3, which is niacin, which otherwise remains bound in the grain. The resulting dough, called nixtamal or masa, heard that word before? Masa?
Yeah.
That's the difference between cornmeal and masa has been soaked in the lime water. Cornmeal has not. Okay? You want the masa.
I always
Okay?
wondered why it was tangy, their corn
Yeah.
stuff. That's
Yeah.
why.
Yeah.
So,
And it can be prepared in a variety of ways to make porridges and breads. So, the indigenous American people prepared their corn by soaking in lime water along with balancing their consumption of it with a varied diet, especially including other sources of protein. In the 19th century, people in the deep southern United States consumed a diet high in untreated corn and suffered from pellagra, an epidemic proportions. Pellagra, which causes thinning and listlessness, sore skin and mouths, depression, hallucinations, irritability, and other mental disorders, was later determined to be caused by a B3 or niacin deficiency. But it was not until 1937 that it was finally proved that pellagra was due to a shortage in the diet of very simple compound niacin, B3. The discovery of such a simple material could have such profound effects not only on the body but on the mind, set off a great wave of nutritional research. One mystery was soon solved. Doctors had known for years the poor Mexicans, who also lived mainly on maize or corn, might suffer from many other diseases, but rarely from pellagra. It emerged that there was, in fact, niacin, B3, in maize or corn, but in a form that could not easily be absorbed. The Mexican women had a custom taken from traditional Indian food preparation of soaking the corn cobs in lime water before they made their tortillas. This apparently released the vitamin or the niacin, and it is an ironic thought that the adaptation of one simple primitive custom might have saved the tens of thousands of ruined lives of the southern South states. And soon it was discovered that less of the vitamin was needed if there was plenty of protein in the diet. That was another thing. They would mix it with proteins. And so you didn't need as much if there was protein in the diet. This knowledge might have helped much in the worst period of pellagra because the people were too poor to buy much protein. Foods like milk and eggs could keep pellagra away. Okay, I wanted to do that one, and then over here. No, I did that one. Now we're going to go on to nuts and seeds. Like whole grains, nuts and seeds must be properly prepared for maximum nutrition. Since the process is so similar to preparing grains, except the cooking part, most people don't cook all your your seeds and your nuts. You don't cook them. So we're going to put these together in the same lesson. Nuts and seeds are rich sources of natural oils, vitamins, and minerals. However, raw nuts and seeds contain enzyme inhibitors, which block our body's use of digestive enzymes. Enzymes are unstable. The enzyme inhibitors in all seeds keep the enzymes dormant during germination. So that's what we mimic in our kitchen through soaking, a germination. Just like with the grains, the soaking mimics that germination. The seed absorbs the water and begins sprouting or germinating. And the enzymes deactivate the enzyme inhibitors. So soaked or germinated raw nuts and seeds then are excellent sources of digestive enzymes. But you want to soak them first. I'm going to pass these around. These are almonds. Don't pass them to Kathy. She's allergic to all nuts, so you won't pass them away. These have been soaked, and then I dehydrated them. And some of the classes I take, they call them crispy nuts because they're a little bit crispier. But these have had all of those enzymes inhibitors taken away. They're neutralized. So I soaked them in a little salt water so they'd have a little bit of salty taste. But anyway, I'll pass these around and we can.
Do you have to put acid and put acid in the nuts and seeds? Acid too? Okay.
You can pass that around.
Cindy, if you go to the store and you buy dry roasted peanuts, have they been soaked?
Basically, all the ones you find in your store, they don't do it at all. No. Yeah.
Can you dehydrate by putting them in the oven on a very low, warm temperature rather than having to
There's lots of different things you can do.
Yeah.
If you have sun out, you can even, I've heard of people doing it inside their car.
set them on the
Set them inside the car because if your car's in the sun, it's getting a lot of heat in that car.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's another way you can dehydrate. Go on, okay. Okay. Another source really good source besides Weston A. Price. There's another one out called Nourishing Traditions by Sally Fallon. She's really good. She has a lot of good resources. She has several books, but there's Nourishing Traditions. Which I think I have at the house, but I wasn't able to find it last night. I found her one called Nourishing Broths. I have that one at the house, but anyway, I'm pretty sure I have Nourishing Traditions around. I just couldn't find it last night. And this is what she says about soaking raw nuts and seeds. Nuts and seeds are rich in sources of natural oils, vitamins, and minerals. However, raw nuts and seeds contain enzyme inhibitors, which basically she's saying everything we just said. So I'm not gonna read that. I'm not gonna worry about it then. Okay. And
Sally who?
Sally Fallon, F-A-L-L-E-N. No, F-A-L-L-O-N.
Okay.
Okay. Sally Fallon. And legumes. I'm gonna go into legumes now. So the only really thing you need to do with your seeds and your nuts is the soaking process. Okay? And some of your seeds are and some of your grains, you have to really, are so soft that they take special care of how to do them. Like millet, quinoa, some of those are so soft. I'm not going to go into it in today's thing, but I have information on how to cook them so that and soak them so that you don't totally destroy them in the soaking process because they are so soft. But I'm not going to go into that today because it's specialized and we don't have time. But legumes. Legumes or beans are a source of high quality, inexpensive nourishment. They offer minerals, B vitamins, essential fatty acids, and soluble and insoluble fiber. As potentially wonderful as they are, poorly prepared beans can produce undesirable results in polite society.
Just call it the musical thing.
Yes. Beans contain phytic acid. Like all seeds, they can impede mineral absorption if not neutralized during soaking or cooking. But also harder beans such as black beans or navy beans contain large complex sugars called oligosaccharides. They can completely confound digestion. Because the beans contain phytic acid and oligosaccharides, which are those complex sugars, our goal during soaking and cooking will be to minimize these effects on digestion. The phytic acid can prevent mineral absorption, which binds with the minerals, and the complex sugars can introduce great digestive discomfort if not approached carefully. But it's not hard. It's just that you need to know how to do it. And it takes time. It does take time, but in all of this stuff, you put it on to soak, you walk away. So you're not standing there over it for 7 hours. I put it on before I go to bed, and I go to sleep, and then get up in the morning, pour off the water, and start with whatever I'm doing. Or the celery. I'll put it on the night before, let it do its thing during the night, get up the next morning, and work with it. So, yes, you have to do things, but you're not standing over it the whole time. And so, the biggest issue is thinking ahead of time.
Yeah.
That's the biggest issue, is you got to decide. You can't have it decide that I'm going to have it, say, well, I'm going to have it for supper in another 4 hours. That won't happen. You have to plan the day before. As long as you know the day before, you're fine. Yes, Mary Claire?
I was told at one point when I quit eating chili and other unpolite things happening to me, that if you put seaweed in the chili or whatever, a big piece of it, you can't taste it, but it takes the unpleasantness away.
Well, it might be doing the same thing as the acid in it. It might be doing that.
Because I've used it forever now.
Yeah. Well,
chili too much.
And beans, there is a lot of nutrition in beans, but we've been scared away from them because of their musical fruit. It scared us away. And, and people think, oh man, I don't have time to do all the soaking. I don't have time to do that, so they just go buy the canned stuff. And really the canned stuff hasn't been, even though it's been soaked somehow, it's not got the nutrition. And you go to buy beans, and they're really not very expensive.
They're very, very.
They're really not, and yet, if you prepare them properly, you can do a lot of things with them. And one of the things that is in them is they have soluble and insoluble fiber, which is very, very beneficial in helping getting our nutrition, our stuff going through our system at the rate it needs to be going through. There are some people that the doctor says, are you eliminating regularly? And people don't know what regularly means. And some people think regularly means once a week.
Once a week, yeah.
That's not what regularly means. Regularly means at least twice a day.
Yes.
Okay? You gotta be getting it out. If you're not getting it out, what's it gonna do? It's gonna ferment in there. And it's gonna lead to all kinds of issues. And that is one of the reasons that the cancer that has the highest rate of people getting it is colon cancer. Is because we're not eliminating the way we should be eliminating.
Yeah.
And getting that stuff moved through, and it's causing issues in there, and it's getting stuck in there instead of going through. And that soluble and insoluble fiber will help with that. Will really help with that. So,
So we soak them in the Cindy, we soak the beans the same way we do with the grains and with the acid.
Yes, there are specific ways to do that. You need to soak them in the acid, but if you're going to cook them, one of the things you got to know with the beans is you soak them, but if you've got a recipe that says soak them in this much water, and you and then prepare them, and you're going to just go on with your recipe, you got to know when you soak them how much water they absorbed. You got to know how, especially if you're going to be pouring it off. Sometimes you don't have to pour it off depending on what it is. But if you're going to pour it off, like if it's in vinegar water, like the apple cider vinegar, and you don't want that sour taste in there and you want to pour it off and rinse them, you need to measure how much you took off so you can replace that amount in the recipe.
Right, okay.
Okay? When you cook them. Okay. I'm not going to go into a lot more. We've got about 10 minutes. I'm going to give time now for some questions. This was all new to me a few years ago. I can't remember. It's 10 to 15 years ago. It was all new to me. Before that, I just I knew you're supposed to soak it. Hard beans, you have to soak them. I mean, what do you do? How else are you going to cook them? But, a lot of this stuff, I didn't realize that there were all these anti-nutrients and why would God put anti-nutrients in foods? And finding out it was to protect them so that they could germinate. And we've just lost how to prepare them. And it's not hard. It just takes thought ahead of time. Something else I've done with beans, because if you've been around here in the summers a lot, one of Jonathan's favorite recipes in the summer was a recipe I have for calico beans, which takes a bunch of different kinds of beans and makes them like baked beans, okay? He loves it. But it always called for canned beans. So I've been trying to figure out how to make it so it's more nutritious. So I've been working with the soaking the grains, and I tried for a while putting them all together, but it was really hard because some of them cooked faster than other ones because some were harder than other ones. So this last summer, I decided I was going to really do it, and I was going to separate them out. I was going to cook several of these different kinds of beans. And I found a way, there's a simple way of doing it that I learned in one of my classes that I was taking here. And that is you can cook the beans up and then put them in a baggie flat, leaving air in there. You don't want to squeeze out all your air. You want some air left in. Lay them flat in your freezer. Okay? Then when you're ready to use them, you take them out and drop them a couple of times. It breaks them all up. It has to be in a baggie. I tried it in containers. That doesn't work. It has to be in a baggie. So then you break it, and then then you can just scoop out however much you want, put the rest back in the freezer until the next time you need it. It's simple. It's like, wow, that saved me a lot of time. Because then I need it, I can just go grab them.
So you've already soaked them and you've already cooked them.
Yes.
Now you've frozen them.
Yeah.
Oh, what a great idea.
Yeah. And it made it really easy. You can add them to all kinds of things, whether it's I'm making the beans stuff or I'm making a soup and I want some beans in my soup or something like that. Yeah.
Salad.
Really easy. Yeah.
Do you use the same ratio of a tablespoon approximately of apple cider vinegar per cup of liquid for soaking beans?
I think it is.
Yeah?
I think it is. I can't remember for sure, but it seems like it is. And I'm not seeing it real quickly here.
The beans, the dried beans, lentils.
Oh, for beans, it's 2 tablespoons per cup.
2 tablespoons. Okay, thank you.
But there's some of them. Okay, I'm just gonna read this some guidelines here. You want to start with a new crop of dry beans. Dry beans that are more than 13 months old are not only less nutritious but harder to rehydrate and therefore more difficult to soak properly. Reputable natural food warehouses and health food stores with good turnover can provide delicious, healthy, and young dried beans. The best beans are brand new to 4 months old, the best ones, newly harvested. Admittedly, this is hard to know. They don't tell you most of the time. In general, older beans are darker and show more cracked skins and more splitting overall. Choose your crock pot or stock pot carefully. It needs to be big enough so that the dry beans do not fill it more than 1/3. Otherwise, you will not be able to fit the amount of water required to cook them thoroughly. For this, So, anyway, going on to, she's talking about this lesson. I'm not going to worry about that. If preparing lentils, navy or white beans, black beans, or fava beans, you also need to add, 1 tablespoon per cup of acid to the dry beans. So that's for lentils, navy, black, or fava. 1 tablespoon per cup. If preparing chickpeas or garbanzo beans, you need 2 tablespoons per cup of water. For the acid, you can use lemon juice, raw apple cider vinegar, or whey, or kefir, whatever. You can use all those different things. For all other beans, no acid is required, but adding a pinch of baking soda can be helpful.
Grandma was right then.
Okay? So beans, it just depends on how much of which kind it is, but most beans you don't have to. And then with beans, like we were saying, you need to know the quantity, how much they're going to grow and how much they're going to absorb. So 1 cup of black beans yields 3.5 cups of cooked. 1 cup of kidney beans yields 3 cups. 1 cup of pinto beans yields 3 cups. And they're different. You need to kind of know a little bit about that. They're all a little different, but they're going to absorb a lot. Okay, yes.
How do you soak flour?
Okay, if I was going to be making my muffins, say, I would take the dry ingredients, not things like salt and baking soda, not those kinds, but all your flour. Sometimes there's other things that you could put in there with it, but sometimes I've done this with doing muffins and stuff. When I'm soaking it, and my nuts, I wanted nuts in it, and they were not already done, I just throw them in there and let them soak with everything else, okay? I put the nuts in there sometimes too, if I'm using them. But then I put all of them together, and you put your liquid ingredients that are in your recipe in there, okay? That's the way I mostly do it. Just put it in with the liquid ingredients that are in there and let it soak for the 7 hours at least. I usually put it in before I go to bed and get up. So sometimes it's been over 7 hours.
Even after you sift it, after you sift the flour.
Yeah. Just soak it overnight.
Do you put it in the refrigerator?
No,
Do you leave
no, it
out?
has to be stay warm, room temperature. And here, sometimes my house is a little cool. Sometimes I've got two different things that I do. One is you can stick it in the oven with the light on, and it's just enough warmth that keeps it somewhere close to 70 degrees by just turning on the light. So that I do that quite a bit. Another thing I have bought when I was really having trouble getting my sourdough starter going, it just was too cool in my house. I went and bought, there's a couple of things you can buy. One is called a sprouting mat. I got it at Home Depot, but it's long, so I don't use that all the time unless I'm doing several things. But it just gives a little bit of warmth, just like for germinating. So a seedling mat, or you can go to the pet store and get a reptile mat. And I have one that's this size, you know. This is bigger, easier to put on my counter than this one. Okay?
But don't eat your reptile.
No. So, and I don't need it all the time. Like right now, I don't even have it plugged in. It's not plugged in at all. But when I was getting the sourdough starter going, it just needed that extra something to get it to start fermenting. And so I needed it during that stage. And right now it's used to going and it's used to doing its thing. And it would probably bubble more if it was warmer. And I could plug it in and it wouldn't hurt it.
I gotta learn how to do that. I remember my great-grandma passing down her sourdough lump to her granddaughter. They would
can
pull out
last.
pieces. I was like, what the heck?
They can last 100 years. There is a place you can even send in for a donation. You can get sourdough starter that was brought over on the wagon trains and to the Oregon Trail. You can, as a novelty, you can do that if you want to. You can send it in. I've got the address somewhere, or you can send it in and get the sourdough starter from.
My grandma says, "Oh, I have
Yeah.
I have my grandma's
Yeah.
What? Is this like rotten food or what? I don't know how to make it.
The charcoal that you put to soak with your rice. Where do you
Okay.
get that charcoal?
I can get that to you later. If you go to the natural groceries or something, or the health food store over in Astoria or whatever, you can get capsules for digestion stuff, which is very good, especially after the flu, after some virus, because it attaches to all that stuff and washes it through. Or food poisoning. If you've gotten a touch of food poisoning, you want some activated charcoal, okay? Activated charcoal, and it'll pull that stuff out of your system, okay?
And so you just open up one of the capsules.
You can do that, but for something like that, it's easier to get a bag of it, and I can look up that information for you and get that to you. And you can buy a bag of it that you can use for soaking with your rice or for lots of different things. You can use that for a lot of different things.
You eat a lot of rice, and I did not know that.
Yes. I didn't know that until this last year.
And we have some friends that go through those at Costco. You have
Like
those big bags.
Israeli.
The whole family goes through one of those big bags a month. And I think I don't think they
soak in rice.
And then they rinse it, but then it's so
Right.
sourdough that came from Jerry's brother, who's had it for like 50 years, because they got it when they got married. But when mine isn't acting up, I give it a little bit of rye flour, and that just seems to feed a little bit more, and it really brings it back. So like it calls for, so if I'm doing if I'm feeding it and it calls for like a cup of flour and a cup of liquid, whether it be water or milk, I go like 3/4 cup, a 3/4 cup white flour or bread flour, and then a 1/4 cup of rye flour, and it seems to lighten it up.
One thing I want to mention is that if you're using a recipe and you don't want to have to go through that soaking stage, you've got a recipe that the soaking just really won't work, you can soak whole grains ahead of time and then dehydrate them and then mill them into flour and use it that way.
Oh, that's a good
Or buy it already done, sprouted flour. If you buy the sprouted flour, it's already had that done, and then you can just use it in your recipe. Any other questions before we wrap this up? Okay, oh yes.
Just one more. We normally do baking gluten-free because our daughter has celiac.
Mhm.
So we just got in the habit of not having any other flour around. Would you soak, like it's Namaste flour is the main one that we use. Would you soak that flour the same? Same as any other kind? Okay. Okay.
Unless it says sprouted, and then it's
Right.
already been, had that done,
Okay. Okay.
okay?
Thanks.
Yeah, just any of those. And I've just ordered, it hasn't come, a whole, I'm gonna look and see how they do it, the whole thing on the gluten-free stuff. 'Cause I don't use a lot of it because I was having troubles with, a lot of those flours are higher in starches, which
Yeah.
are harder on my blood sugars.
Yes.
And so I have issues with some of that. So you have to really be careful.
Yeah.
Another thing is a lot of times they use rice, and if
Yes.
rice, it can be gritty, and it just doesn't have a texture that I really like.
Yeah.
And it just works differently. So you have to be careful
Yeah.
how you're doing and what you're doing, but there's also some really good things you can do with them out there.
Mhm. We don't do a lot of baking.
Right.
And now we're gonna do a little bit more shifting into regular type of flour, but yeah. Just one.
Yeah. But yeah, you just, all grains.
Yeah.
You know, whether it has gluten in it or not, you treat them all the same.
Cheese. Okay, thanks.
Okay?
I have one more question there.
Uh-huh.
Jerry really likes canned corn, and so obviously that has not been soaked either.
Right.
Can a person open up a can of canned corn, you think, and like drain it and then soak it for a while? Would that make any difference, do you think? I don't know.
I wouldn't drain it. I would just maybe put a little lime in it and let it just continue to soak for a while.
Yeah, just some lime in it. Okay.
I don't think
I-
Jeremy's mom
I
even knew what
haven't
she
got
was doing.
anything that says that's the way you do it, but that's what I would think.
Yeah, okay, nice.
I would just not drain it, though. I would just.
She would use just a regular
But then
lime,
drain it off, I guess.
Yeah.
Drain it off.
and she'd soak it in the water.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
If you buy a bag of masa flour, has it already gone through that process? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Masa flour has already been properly prepared.
Yeah.
I think it gets passed down
Thank
to generation, but how do
Okay.
you know about nutrients?
Good. Let's close with a word of prayer.
Through the lineage.
Our gracious Heavenly Father, I just thank you that you have given us so many wonderful things out there, and you have a way that you intend us to eat the foods that you have provided. And a lot of the times we have forgotten because we have learned new things and think we don't need to do it the way you intended it. And Lord, thank you that you are starting to teach us again how to get back to the ways you would have us to prepare the things so that we don't end up getting sick. And I just thank you for all these things now. And thank you for each of these that have come today. And Lord, help our minds to remember the things that we need to know when we come to doing these, preparing these foods to be nutritious for us. Thank you for all these things now. In Jesus' name, amen.
Get out.